Jesse, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm actually super excited to chat with you because this is very much in line with a topic that I'm quite passionate about. Jesse Favre is a global trainer and speaker who helps leaders build workspaces where well being and performance go hand in hand. She spent more than a decade in healthcare, including hospital leadership before launching her own business. At first, she fell into the trap of hustle culture, working 7 days a week and delaying her own paycheck until health challenges forced her to slow down and rethink what it really means to be a good boss. Today, she draws on her MSW MBA background and personal journey to teach managers and entrepreneurs why self care and leadership is essential. I first want to jump right into this conversation of what does it mean to be a good entrepreneur? Or what does it mean to be effective in any capacity in your life? People can work from 9 to 5, people can work incredible hours to build a life that they wish to have, but they don't take care of their health.
Mhm.
They don't feel like they look good. And what's it all about, right? It's the whole point is that you're supposed to have an overall quality of life. And if being a good worker comes at the expense of your happiness, it is so counterproductive to your end goal. So I love how, and we don't really always see it until we experience burnout, and hustle culture just makes sense when you think of it. Doing more is better, right?
Mhm.
So if you need to do X to get somewhere, if you can do it twice as fast, that is better. Explain to us why that's not the case.
So, first of all, I totally agree. We have to be thinking about well-being. For me, when I think about success, I think about a balanced scorecard and what
Mm,
that means if you apply that to your life. And so, within a balanced scorecard, you have to have some KPIs. You have to have some measures related to well-being because, like you said, if you have success in all other aspects, but you have stress that's left unmanaged and you experience burnout, you're not going to have your career that long.
mm,
And on top of that, if you're self-employed, you're an entrepreneur, you're representing your company. And so there's a piece of this to me that is just energy management 101. It is constantly checking in with yourself because if you have run yourself ragged, you can't show up and represent. You can't have the impact you want to have. So to me, success is looking at all of the typical KPIs you would look at as a business owner and also the balancing measure of how am I feeling? Can I sustain this? What's my energy like? And that's the piece that I often see left out of conversations around leadership and entrepreneurship.
mm. I want to kind of take a dive into a completely separate category, and then we're going to mesh them together. You mentioned ADHD.
Mhm.
Now, what I've noticed is at an early stage in your life, having ADHD puts you in a category in the schooling system. You have to get private attention. You have to take a Ritalin. But I think, and it's looked at as a disability, but I
Mhm.
I think it can be weaponized effectively to truly help you carve out something that I call your uniqueness factor.
Mhm.
It's what will give you advantage in your competitive landscape. And it's not something you should fight. It's something that you should learn to work with.
Mhm.
You can't focus on one task. Start to become really good at focusing on 10 tasks. You know, I want to know what your opinion is on. First of all, I want to tell me about your experience with
Mhm.
ADHD, and has it helped you with growth? Has it given you insights? Tell me all about it.
Yes. So I think I had a slightly different journey in that I was very much a late diagnosis ADHDer. So I got diagnosed when I was 35. And I don't know if this resonates with anybody else, but for me, it was sort of feeling like my fly had been down and nobody told me for 35 years. And I was like, oh crap, what have I done? Right. And so the diagnosis was actually incredibly helpful because, on the one hand, there were absolutely some gaps in my skill set that I wanted to focus on. But to your point, there were also these super strengths that I had not fully appreciated. And I didn't really have language or a framework for understanding why this was the way it was. So, for instance, as a business owner, there were certain things I was doing, especially like on camera, public speaking, where I would get lost in my work and I would hyper focus and I
Mm,
could get so much done. But when I would try to deposit a check, when I would try to do my invoices, like the absolute basic stuff that has to get done, I would rather take the
Yeah.
GRE all over again than do that. And I think for me, with all of this, being self-employed, when you're your own boss, you have a very unique position where you can get curious about yourself as an employee and say, okay, if I'm this person's boss, how do I maximize what's great about them? And how do we start to rethink this other stuff? Like, do we really need to develop skills, or can this be delegated? Can this be, shared with someone else who loves
Right.
doing that? And so when you talk about that unique factor, it is about like leaning into what is distinct about you and sometimes letting go of the stuff that's just not working within your nature so that you
Yes.
you can use this to excel.
100%. And this, this certainly applies to everyone.
Mhm.
We like doing the things we're good at, and and we don't like doing the things we're bad
Mhm.
at. But I feel this is hyper compounded with ADHD. It is impossible to do things you don't like doing,
Yeah.
and you can kind of super hyper focus on the things you do enjoy doing. And yeah, again, every day you got to wake up in the morning and say, what is extremely unique about
Mhm.
myself and what can I patternize and delegate? I could not agree with you more. I think that that is one of the most important questions you have to ask yourself as an entrepreneur, and even as an employee or as anyone,
Mhm.
especially with how the landscape is changing today with tools like ChatGPT and natural language processors, and where your B student is really getting flushed out
Mhm.
because ChatGPT is doing a really good job at doing B plus level work.
Mhm.
And you do not want to find yourself below that curve. You want to find yourself above that curve.
Mhm.
Um, and I do wonder how having ADHD now, how has that like kind of added to the burnout or the hustle culture? Is that completely separate? Do you
With
feel like there's some
AI or
connection there?
ADHD?
ADHD.
With ADHD. So, I do think that it contributed to that. I absolutely do because I'm out looking for dopamine constantly. It is my favorite neurotransmitter. I will be the first to say that. So, yeah, I think that absolutely can lead you to seek out things that are gonna get you that dopamine hit. And so,
Mm.
there's that piece of it. And then the other piece for me is, just feeling like a high-speed car that doesn't have any brakes on it. I was not really good at boundary setting because I was moving way too fast to even think about what it is that I needed or wanted in a client relationship. I certainly wasn't communicating those things. It was just like the more the merrier. Let's get more contracts. And as I slowed down and really started to focus on some of the skills that I had been missing, uh, it became much more easy to manage. It became more easy to have control over what your quality of life might be like. And so, yeah, I think that there are some pieces that can contribute to hustle culture. And I also think that there are learnable skills that can be very, very helpful.
Mm. Let's take a time machine back to your first year of self-employment. Give me an image of your mindset at that time.
Yeah. So that time it was going from being in the fishbowl, which was hospital leadership. This was like a world I knew. It was regular paychecks, it was security, it was safety, and it was like tipping that out and going out into the ocean.
It's a
And
very, very hard bridge for people to cross. Very hard.
it's
Because
totally different.
yeah. And a lot of times your 9 to 5, you've got a high survival cost. You don't
Mhm.
have the luxury of taking this risk and kind of engaging with a whole new model. And I like to say that when you work for these companies, you work for someone else's company. You have a price tag to forget about your own dream. You're paid to forget about your own dreams and build someone else's.
Yep.
And yeah, it's like you don't have those safe. For those who are lucky who can move back, like, oh yeah, I wish I could start my own company, right? But the question becomes, what are you willing to give up to get it? And we all have these things. We live in a beautiful place. We have a high rent. Are you willing to move back with your parents to save money so you can bridge that gap? So just when you tell me like, you have the 9 to 5, you had that security, um, I would love to know. And I know you're in the middle of answering your question, but it's such an important question because there are so many people who would agree with what you're saying in theory,
Mhm.
but it is such a hard jump to make. I would love to know and for you to emphasize on that part of your journey.
Yeah, it wild horses could not stop me from what I was about to do. So I just want to make that very clear. I remember I was like maybe 6 months into my business and one of my best friends came over and I was cooking beans on the stove and I had cans of beans everywhere and she's like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "I will eat these forever if I have to." Like I have to start this business. I felt so strongly about it. And you're
Mm,
right. I mean, you have to be willing to take a step back in terms of quality of life. You have to face the realities of what does this mean from a resource perspective, whether it's the amount of time that you're going to give, whether it's the budget that you're willing to work within until you build your company up. And so yeah, I can appreciate why that is so difficult. And yeah, I mean, there are certain resources that I had access to from having worked in leadership and saving over time, but it still was very scary. And I think going into that, it's very easy, or at least it was for me, to focus on these risks so much that that's almost all you could think about. And so when you mentioned like I wasn't paying myself out from my company, it was scarcity mindset. It was, what if I
mm,
can't replenish this? What if this is all that I have? And so as
right.
much as there can be some realities with that, I also think, at least for me, it's an anxiety thing. And
Well,
so that was
it's
very much a conversation that I have had many times with a therapist to be able to psychologically get through that phase of feeling like, well, what if this doesn't work?
right. And that's also a carving mindset. It's like a
Hmm.
diamond carving mindset where you're forced to do so much with so little.
Hmm.
That does shape how you think moving forward. Can you tell me a little bit about your initial job and what job you went into that you started on your own?
Yeah. So before I started my company, which was about 3.5 years ago, I was in healthcare. So I had a career that I am forever grateful for in healthcare. I worked in hospital leadership, I worked in consulting, I was a strategist. And I really got to a point, especially going through the pandemic in healthcare, that I wanted to support other leaders. And what I was finding from a skill perspective is there was a huge opportunity to hone in on what makes us human at work and just get a better understanding of that. And so when I started my company, it was as a leadership trainer, which I continue to work as, and then really started to get into public speaking. And it was bringing
Mm,
this world of how do we take care of ourselves with how do we perform well and figuring out how to make these things overlap because I firmly believe that they do. And so that's really been my work. And since then, I've done more than 900 workshops and seminars trying
wow.
to unlock insights about human behavior at work.
Oh, wow. Can you tell me, was it like an epiphany or a sudden moment where you burnt out and you're like, hey, this fundamentally needs to take a shift in direction?
Yes. And I will tell you, Mikey, it's so bizarre. Like this whole thing, this like my breaking point was actually predicted by a psychic. So buckle
Wow.
up for this one. Yeah. So I was out of state. It was my very first out of state gig as a business owner. And I got done with a training gig and I was walking through this harbor and I see a psychic and it was $10 for 10 minutes. And I thought I have both of those. So I met with this woman and she said right away, like, your energy is leadership. She was like, you're recognized for the power behind your voice and you're going to have a problem with your throat. And I was like, oh, like my throat chakra. And she's like, no, like your actual throat, you're going to lose your voice. And a week later, I got strep and COVID at the same time. And I
Uh-huh.
did, I lost my voice. And what ended up happening after that is the reflux didn't go away. So if I worked really hard, if I was working really long hours, the reflux would come up and I would lose like the one tool as a speaker that I had to have access to
Uh,
do my job. And so it was very Little Mermaid. And I was really at this point where I had to reimagine how to work or I physically couldn't do my job anymore. And so like when I say acid reflux saved my career, people are like, what? But it actually did. And in some ways it saved my quality of life.
Interesting. So here we have the problem. What do you take any specific steps or what strategies did you implement to get to where you are now?
Yeah. So I think for me, the first issue was recognizing that there was a lack of boundaries, that I had not been really clear with myself, first of all, of what was a need versus a preference. And I had to have some conversations with clients about what things were going to look like going forward. So I worked with an ADHD coach on that. It was incredibly helpful. That was the first major step. The second thing that happened is I had to get curious about why I had the scarcity mindset. And so for me, it was, hey, you've got generalized anxiety disorder as well. You need to go back to therapy. And so I meet
Oh,
weekly with a therapist unless I'm out of state. I take it really seriously. And
yeah.
that is to make sure that I'm taking care of my nervous system. And then the last thing that was also a missing piece in this was really around embracing breaks. And the reason that I
Mm,
had not been doing it is you were talking about like your time is money. So you work twice as much, you make more money. When I first started working, I did so many contracts that were hourly rate. And so I was
mm,
calculating if I take an hour off, it's worth X amount of money, and I can't
mm.
afford to do that right now. And then when I would think about a vacation, it's like you multiply that out and
Yeah.
it's absolute misery.
I remember as a kid, I would buy like soda from the vending machine. I'm like, oh, that's like a half hour of work.
Yep.
I'm like, oh, is it worth it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's so brutal, and I had never thought that way because I had been salaried, and so it was just this different mindset, and I had to stop doing the math. And I had to start going back to your energy makes a difference. It's an investment actually in your company if that's what you're concerned about right now, because you can't show up and do this work if you've not taken care of yourself first. And so now I am like scanning my schedule. And if I find a little block of time, I'm in bed, I'm hula hooping in the yard, like I will do something, but I will
Amazing.
psychologically disconnect from work. And I have found that that is probably the most important thing in terms of just being able to sustain the work that I do.
Yeah. I really love what I do. And I think I'm 100% a victim of hustle culture.
Mhm.
Uh, like there are certain aspects of my life where I've got great discipline and I do a really good job in, and then stuff like the problem with the lack of the 9 to 5 structure is, again, you get to do what you love all the
Mhm.
time, but the idea like when someone tells me, oh, it's 5 o'clock on a Friday, I'll message you Monday, I don't have access to my work email.
Mhm.
Like that is like a foreign thought to me. I don't understand that.
Mhm.
And I almost like, why? If you love what you do, like you should try to. I love doing stuff over. I
Mhm.
do. The problem is that I love hustle culture, and I understand the problem that comes with it, and I do burn out. But for whatever reason, I wake up the next morning and I'm like, yeah, let's get right back at it. There are times where, like, even for like a prolonged few days, I'm just not effective. I'm just burnt out. I just don't feel motivated. But I really do think these sort of career paths we take in life come with an illusion of choice where, hey, we can work from 9 to 5 at Facebook and get paid X amount of dollars, subscribe to a linear system. You get paid a little more every year. You kind of plateau at the
Mhm.
top. Or you can take this exponential curve where, you're making nothing for your first few years, but, you're heading the entrepreneurial route. You hit this inflection curve and then you really do reap whole lot of benefits and you can be going straight up. Right. And we almost appear like we have a choice to choose one or the other, but I think that we're just predisposed for whatever reason, because there's no reason why I don't wake up one day and I'm like, just fuck all this. Let me just
Mhm.
get this like 9 to 5 strict thing where, it's like after 5 o'clock, I kick it back and I have my wine and watch the game or whatever most people do. Um, but the truth is, I, I wish I would do that, but it just doesn't make me happy.
Yep.
Right. And it's not a choice. Technically, I could choose, but I don't know why the neurons fire in my
Mhm.
brain every single day when I wake up to head in one direction and not the other. Um, so it ultimately, the way I start to realize, first of all, is I am coming around to realize that, no matter what path you take in life, you want to have a family, you want to have a good personal life, you want to have a low stress environment. And you can be a workaholic for the most part, but there has to be some line that you
Mhm.
can't cross. Because, like we mentioned at the start of this conversation, we're all defined by our weakest component, right? If you're making $1 million a week and you're killing it, I was thinking of picking a really big number. I was like, $1 million a
I
year. And
love it.
I'm like, let's do like $10
Sure.
billion a year. $1 million, I had to
Let's
switch to a
crank it
week
up.
because,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, but you're making $1 billion a year and you're living a very good life, but you have diabetes and you're overweight and you don't take care of yourself and you don't like how you look. Like, I don't know. To me, it's like, it doesn't make any sense because it's all about living the best quality of life.
Hmm.
So if your work starts to infringe on other stuff
Hmm.
that infringe on your happiness, I think that's where the line should be. Um, and the people around you need to be happy, and you have to have a great relationship with your girlfriend, your wife, your parents. I think it's all important and equally important to work. And, I know that sounds like common sense to most people, but for some people who work every day, it's more of something you have to learn over time. And I think for you, maybe the burnout was like that epiphany where you realize that it's not about doing more of one thing isn't always better.
Yeah, and I think it's discernment too about the type of stress. Like, is this good beneficial stress, like what you're describing? You wake up and you can't wait to go out and do it again, or has it become too intense, or is that so chronic in nature that it's draining for you? And being able to tell the difference between eustress and distress is huge. And so that's something that I'm always trying to ask myself, like, is this good, expansive, energizing stress, or is this like I need to lay in bed and eat cookie stress?
Hmm.
Because they're two totally different types. And so, yeah, just being able to read yourself and also know that what works for you may be very different for someone else. And that doesn't mean either person is better or worse. But just having that self-awareness of how you feel as you work, as you wake up, as you get ready to go to bed. And like you said, holistically thinking about how does this career that I'm picking fit in with the bigger picture of what matters to me?
Amazing. Now, someone graduating college,
Mhm.
looking to start their life, and they're extremely passionate to head down the entrepreneurial route. What would be the one piece of advice you'd give to them?
Ooh. The one piece of advice. So I would actually probably pass along advice that somebody told me many years ago, and it was to establish a GPA. And so by this, what she said to me was, you play all these different roles in life. And if you gave yourself a grade for all these different roles, what is it that you're shooting for a
Mm,
GPA? And she said, she was like this high power executive at a healthcare company. She was like, I'm shooting for a B average. It was the most freeing thing that I think anybody's ever said to me. And so I would suggest thinking about realistically for how many things you've taken on, what's the GPA that you do think you can get? Even if you were an A student, because we're not talking about school, we're talking about the school of life where you have taken on a whole bunch of stuff. Like, what is that GPA? And
is that
then
GPA of like your overall quality of life or your business ventures?
so there's the business part of you. It's like that role that you play as an entrepreneur. It's the role that you play as a roommate, a sibling, a spouse, whatever those roles are. If each one got a grade, what is the GPA
Right.
overall that you feel is possible? Letting yourself ebb and flow, because there might be one week where I am like an A plus girlfriend, and then the next week I feel like a C because I'm focusing so much on work. But if I know that my overall goal is to be a B average, I give myself that permission to kind of go up and down in those roles. And that includes as an entrepreneur. And so
Right.
I sometimes I think it's just very freeing to say, like,
Yeah,
I'm gonna let myself get a B. I
and that
am.
beautifully ties into the conversation we've just been having where,
Hmm.
it's like you might get an A on business, but if you get a C on boyfriend and a D on just, self-confidence and all that stuff, then your GPA is going to be kind of poor.
Hmm.
And whoever gave you this piece of advice really elegantly summarized this conversation. And I think that's like the best answer to the question given this conversation. Yeah, awesome. Now, Jesse, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Mikey, come on. Haven't you had a good enough sense of me? I don't know where I am 5 days from now.
I know.
Um,
I'm
you
asking
know,
that question for you because when you listen to it in 5 years from now, you're just gonna laugh
oh
because
gosh, yeah,
you
this will
you
be
you would have gotten
interesting.
so much further than you imagined.
I hope. Yeah, maybe it's those weeks we talked about earlier. No, I really feel like I
I feel like that
understand.
question gave you anxiety.
Well, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's like my college days, the
Yeah,
advisors would ask what I wanna do. I was like, "I don't know, because 'cause
yeah,
I am so all over the place, and I do believe in being responsive to changes that are happening and
yeah,
opportunities that are coming up." What I suspect is that 5 years from now, I still have the same focus on caring about well-being at work, on getting into the messy human stuff and helping people have an easier time, especially people that are high achievers that want to have success but don't want to lose these other aspects of their life. I suspect that I'm still focused on that when I watch this 5 years from now. But what that looks like, I couldn't tell you, and I don't want to know. I'm going to let
great
that one
answer.
unfold.
Yeah, yeah, these are open-ended questions. They're meant to say more about you than the actual answer.
Yeah.
Uh, Jesse, thank you so much for your time and wisdom. How can people get in touch with you?
So you can go to my website. It's Jesse, Jesse, and the last name is spelled like Brett Favre, Favre.com. That's probably the best way to get contact information. But truly, if you search my name on almost any platform, you should find me as long as I'm doing my job right. So please connect in any way that's valuable for you.
Thank you, Jesse. I appreciate your time and wisdom.
Yeah, thank you.